An evolutionary biologist has said that he believes extraterrestrial entities are real, living on Earth, and look almost identical to humans. Simon Conway Morris is among a handful of scientists, researchers, and experts who believe that aliens have lived amongst humans undetected in underground bases in the Earth. This picture was released by a professor by the name of Bruno Samosixia. A Catholic historian with degrees in psychology and psychiatry, he was the author of more than 100 books and a well-known, distinguished figure in Italian academic circles. He is thought to have taken this photograph of an alleged 10-foot-tall extraterrestrial being in Italy in 1976. If you read the lore, there are many stories of a mysterious group of extraterrestrials who look like humans and who established underground bases in Italy, meeting with local residents between 1956 and 1978. Not long before his death, Samosixia claimed he had had direct physical contact with extraterrestrials over several decades. Dr. Roberto Pinotti, a leading Italian ufologist, has since confirmed his decades-long knowledge of the Samosixia cases. When it comes to human extraterrestrial contact in modern history, this case ranks among the most compelling, given the pictures and the number of witnesses involved. Here is a brief summary of the Samosixia contact story as given by UFO researcher Dr. Michael Salla, founder of exopolitics.org. In 1956, when Bruno Samosixia and two friends met with two mysterious individuals who said they were extraterrestrials. One was over 8 foot tall while the other was just over 3 foot. Samosixia and his friends, initially skeptical, were eventually taken into a large underground base where they saw more of the alleged extraterrestrials. They also saw their children being educated, some of the advanced technologies they used, and their spaceships. Finally convinced that they were really having physical contact with extraterrestrials, Samosixia and his friends began to help the extraterrestrials. They began with material support by arranging for truckloads of fruit, food, and other material to be transported and unloaded at an extraterrestrial base. Eventually, 2 truckloads of supplies were being delivered every month to bases in different regions of Italy where Samosixia and his assistants lived. Samosixia finally described a violent conflict between 2 factions of extraterrestrials trying to influence humanity's development and future. While his friendship faction promoted cosmic unity and ethical development, the other faction promoted technological development at all cost. This led to periodic violent clashes between the factions. Eventually, the underground bases of Samosixia's extraterrestrial friends was destroyed in 1978. Survivors had to leave the Earth but promised to return at a future time when humanity was ready for a more ethical future of humanity interacting with extraterrestrials. Samosixia's astounding story sounds like an episode from Star Trek, but it is well supported by documentary evidence, some of Italy's finest UFO researchers, and first-hand witnesses of the events described. Some of the witnesses were leading statesmen, scholars, and high society figures from Italy and Europe. Here you will see a picture that was given to the world by Phil Schneider. Phil was a very controversial figure, as was his death. He was born in 1947 and was the son of Oscar and Sally Schneider. Oscar was a captain in the United States Navy who apparently worked in nuclear medicine and helped design the first nuclear submarines. He was also supposedly part of the famous Philadelphia experiment, as well as Operation Crossroads, a program to test nuclear weapons. Oscar Schneider is the gentleman to the right of the man with the red circle around his head. They resemble each other quite strongly, but the man with the circle around his head is the supposed extraterrestrial. The others are some of the world's top physicists from the time. Philip claimed to be an ex-government structural engineer who was involved in building underground military bases, around the country. We've actually published a couple of detailed articles about DUMBs, whose existence is not mere speculation. Phil had some incredible stories to tell about various moments in his life, one of which was the story of how he lost 2 fingers and had his body sliced open. While all of this is anecdotal and unverifiable, it is interesting to consider nonetheless. A lot of what I have discovered in these 2 cases, which are much more detailed than I am presenting here, corroborates with other UFO research I have conducted. This all leads me to believe, without a doubt, that extraterrestrials exist and they are here. Phil passed away shortly after beginning to give lectures on the nature of his work. To this day, his ex-wife continues to raise awareness about the truth behind his death. Some interesting quotes, a few out of hundreds. Dr. Edgar Mitchell, sixth man to walk on the moon. Yes, there have been crashed craft, and bodies recovered. We are not alone in the universe, they have been coming here for a long time. I happen to be privileged enough to be in on the fact that we have been visited on this planet, and the UFO phenomenon is real. John Podesta, taken from Leslie Kean's 2010 New York Times bestseller, UFOs, Generals, Pilots, and Government Officials Go on the Record, in which Podesta wrote the foreword. I'm skeptical about many things, including the notion that government always knows best, and that the people can't be trusted with the truth. The time to pull the curtain back on this subject is long overdue. We have statements from the most credible sources, those in a position to know about a fascinating phenomenon, the nature of which is yet to be determined. Paul Hellyer, former Canadian Defence Minister. Decades ago, visitors from other planets warned us about where we were headed and offered to help. But instead, we, or at least some of us, interpreted their visits as a threat, and decided to shoot first and ask questions after. Dr. Don Dondery, a retired McGill University professor of 40 years in the Department of Psychology. Some of what people report as UFOs are extraterrestrial, ET, vehicles. Some of those extraterrestrial vehicles actually have ET crews, and some of those ET crews catch and release humans. Senator Barry Goldwater, chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee. This thing has gotten so highly classified. It is just impossible to get anything on it. I have no idea who controls the flow of need to know because, frankly, I was told in such an emphatic way that it was none of my business that I've never tried to make it to be my business since. I have been interested in this subject for a long time, and I do know that whatever the Air Force has on the subject is going to remain highly classified. Jack Kosher, Ph.D., Professor Emeritus of Physics, University of Nebraska. There is another way, whether it's wormholes, or warping space, there's got to be a way to generate energy so that you can pull it out of the vacuum, and the fact that they're here shows us that they found a way. General Carlos Castro Cavero, 1979, From UFOs and the National Security State, Volume 2, written by Richard Dolan. Everything is in a process of investigation both in the United States and in Spain, as well as the rest of the world. The nations of the world are currently working together in the investigation of the UFO phenomenon. There is an international exchange of data.